الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن والاه ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم. So today, inshallah, I'm not going to be referencing the Ihya. I'm going to be reading from it. There's a big difference, but inshallah, at the end of the talk, bi'idhnillah, I will tell you a place wherein you can find a far more expansive explanation of it, inshallah, and far more extensive of this specific chapter. So, for those who don't know, Imam al-Ghazali died 505 in the Hijri calendar. I forget what it corresponds to from the Gregorian calendar, but he was a scholar who dedicated his entire life to serving the religion and serving Muslims. And after a long life and many different stages that he went through in his life, he wrote this book, the Ihya Ulum ad-Din, which translates to me the revival of the religious sciences. And this book is one that the scholars have mentioned that if he wrote it actually with the intention that if we had no other book of religious sciences, then this would suffice us. We'd be okay. And the book is quite extensive. It consists of 4 different volumes depending on your printing. I have a volume that's like 9 or 10 because it's broken up. But in it, Imam al-Ghazali, he talks about many different things, primarily focusing on the heart. And in the 3rd volume, he has an entire book called Kitab Sharh Ajaib al-Qalb, the book of an explanation of the, I don't want to say the strangeties of the heart, but the more interesting things of the heart. And in that book, he mentions a specific part talking about the khawatir, the subtle inclinations, the involuntary inclinations of the heart and how we feel. So, after the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, قال المصنف رحمه الله تعالى ونفعنا الله بعلمه في الدارين. After with the Bismillah, the author, may Allah have mercy on him and allow us to benefit from his knowledge in this life and the next. He starts off by talking about the heart and how the heart has many different areas for things to get into it. And it has many different conditions. And he gives the metaphor of a heart being like a dome that has many different doors, and that each door is a different way for things to get into it. And then he continues on by saying, وَإِنَّمَا الْمَدَاخِلَ هَذِهِ الْآثَارَ الْمُتَجَدِّدَةِ فِي الْقَلْبِ فِي كُلِّ حَالٍ. That there are many different doors that have many different type of athar, or different effects on the heart in many different circumstances. As far as the external things, and these are the hawas al-khams, the 5 senses. The 5 senses are an external means that we are enabled, that our heart is affected, both positively and negatively. And as for internally, then these are things like the intellect, or what we dream about, our desires, being angry, our manners, al-akhlaq al-mubarak, al-akhlaq al-murakkaba, min al-mazaj al-insan, and that the characters that are comprised of the things that people desire. So our desires in general. So Imam al-Ghazali, just to pause, mentioned that our heart is many different avenues or different ways that it's affected, both positively and negatively. And the 2 types of ways that our heart is affected are external and internal. From external things, then there are the 5 senses: our hearing, our taste, our smell, our sight, and our touch. These are external things that directly affect our heart. The things that we see affect our heart. The things that we touch, quite obviously, affect our hearts. The things that we listen to affect our hearts. And I'm not just talking about music or profanity and lewd talk, or just things that are negative in nature affect our heart. Just like listening to Quran positively affects our heart, listening to a dars, a religious lesson, affects our heart in a positive way. And then the things that are secret or are internal are the things that happen on the inside. From our desires, from our dreams, the things that we imagine, getting angry, all of these things have an effect on our heart. Because all of these things, if we don't control them, can negatively impact us. And if we do control them, can be a means for us to go close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Imam Ghazali continues on to say, فَإِنَّهُ إِذَا أَدْرَكَ بِالْحَوَاسِ شَيْئًا حَصَلَ مِنْهُ أَثَرَ فِي الْقَلْبِ. So that if any of these things affect us, then they leave an athar on our heart. They leave a remnant on our heart. Oh, I thought I heard someone talking. And the same thing goes to our desires. So the example that Imam Ghazali gives is if we are to eat a lot of food, because we have a strong desire to eat, then this desire now has an effect on our heart. Now the quite obvious effect is that if we eat a lot of food, then we become lethargic. If we eat a lot of food, then perhaps we'll oversleep and miss Fajr. If we eat a lot of food, then it'll affect our thought process and how we think about things. We become more bahimi, more animalistic, for lack of better words, in our orientation. And modern science proves the things that we eat affect how we think psychologically. And these are all different things that have an effect on our heart. And فإن كف عن الإحساس فالخيالات الحاصلة في النفس تبقى ويتنطق الخيال من كل شيء إلا شيء. So I'm not going to try to translate it verbatim because Imam Ghazali is very eloquent, but all of these things, if you withhold from them, if you restrict how we feel about these things, then they then have an effect on our nafs, the same on our soul, the same way is if we engage in them. And this then affects from one thing to another. And with regard to this thing, how it affects us, and it goes from the one thing to the next, whether we engage in it or we withhold from it, then this then affects our heart and changes our heart from one condition to the next. So perhaps when we first engage in a positive thing, when we first engage in listening to Quran, for example, it'll have one effect on our heart. But then by continuous engaging and listening to the Quran, then we now start to have tadabbur. We then begin to have deep reflection on the Quran. And then after having tadabbur on the Quran, then it starts to have an effect on our heart. And an example of that is what I told you last time I got up here, is how when I was 16, I used to always listen to the same sharit, the same cassette tape in my car. And I used to blast the Quran, my favorite reciter, and I knew not just every word of this tape, I knew every inflection. I knew I recorded over that part so it would skip, and I knew what the tape was supposed to say. But then after time, even this, after thinking about why I was listening to the Quran in this way, or what the meaning of it was, I remember it had a certain effect on me. So when the Qari would recite a certain voice, his voice would fluctuate this way, and that was because it meant that, and that affected me. But then after deeper reflection about myself, I was ignorant of why I was actually listening to Quran in this way, and what I thought about myself because I was listening to Quran. And again, this is about our shahwa, this is about our desires and our thoughts and what we think about ourselves and what we think about other things. So then Imam Ghazali continues on to mention that المقصود أن القلب في التغير والتأثر دائما من هذه الأسباب. He said, so what is intended by all of this is that our heart is always in a state of changing and a state of effect because of these things that cause them, from these asbab, these reasons. And he says the most severe or the most important of them is, of the things that happen in our hearts, is the khawatir, are the involuntary suggestions that come. And I'm going to use the word khawatir, but understand from that, I'll try to use the English as much as possible. But Imam Ghazali then explains what are khawatir. He says, أعني بالخواطر ما حصل فيه من الأفكار والأذكار وأعني به إدراكاته العلوما. He says, what I mean by khawatir, he said these are the things that come to a person involuntarily from thoughts and memories. And I mean by that the things that happen, this information that we get from it. So pause, khawatir, I said were involuntary suggestions or involuntary things. But they're the thoughts and they are the memories that happen in our minds. And these things, Imam Ghazali will continue on to mention how they're both positive and negative. But to stop right here, these are things that are involuntary, meaning we don't have control over them. These thoughts and these memories that come to us, sometimes, as one of my teachers mentions, are some of the most repulsive things that to even mention them are embarrassing. And sometimes they are very, very beautiful in the nature of them. But because they're involuntary, we are not held accountable for them. But also because they're involuntary, they are not a proof or an indication to our nature as people, meaning are we either very good or are we very bad? So Imam Ghazali continues on to say that they're called these things because they are things that they're called khawatir. They're called inclinations because there are things that come to our hearts after we've become negligent. The exact wording is وإنها تسمي الخواطر من حيث أنها تخطر بعد أن كان القلب غافلا عنها. Because these things, they are called khawatir, because they are things that come to us after our heart is in a state of ignorance of them. والخواطر هي المحركات للإدراك. And so our khawatir, these involuntary inclinations, are the things that move our senses. So again, this part is probably the most important part of everything I'm going to say tonight. Those involuntary inclinations are the means of moving our senses. فإن النية والعزم والإرادة إنما تكون بعد خطور المنوي بالبال ولا محالة. That the niyyah, our intention, والعزم, our determination to do something, والإرادة, our desire to do something, all of these things come after this involuntary inclination comes to our intellect, and it won't come any other way. Again, these thoughts are the root, the foundation of everything else with regards to our actions. But not just our actions, they come in stages. As Imam Ghazali mentions here, and Ibn Qayyim mentions in other places, that this is the chain of events, for lack of better words, that happens with regards to our hearts. That first we have this khatir that comes, we have this involuntary inclination that comes to our minds. And from that involuntary inclination, then it moves on to being something that we would like. So at first it was, let me go to the masjid. And then after me saying, let me go to the masjid, then it will become perhaps a desire. I'd like to go to the masjid. And then after being a desire, it can then move on to being something that I'm going to go to the masjid. And after being something that I'm determined to do, it becomes something that I engage in. And the ulama, they differentiate in how they actually divide them up. And so this is why the khatir is al-akhas, the most important thing that we have that affects our hearts, because, we have to make sure that we start to pay attention to what our heart is feeling. We have to try to make our heart sensitive to the things that it wants, sensitive to the things that it's inclined to, and sensitive to the things that it dislikes. Because both the things that it is inclined to and the things that it dislikes, we have to pay attention to. Because if we're not careful, then we can trick ourselves into becoming ghafil. We can trick ourselves into becoming heedless to the things that end up happening. So, Imam Ghazali continues on saying, فَمَبْدَأَ الْأَفْعَالِ الْخَوَاتِرِ. So the origin of all actions are the khawatir. ثُمَّ الْخَاطِرُ يُحَرَّكُ الرَّغْبَةِ. So then the khatir moves our desires. وَالرَّغْبَةُ تُحَرِّكُ الْعَزْمِ. And then our desires move or empower our determination to do something. وَالْعَزْمُ تُحَرِّكَ النِّيَّةِ, and our determination to do something then empowers or moves our intentions. وَالنِّيَّةُ تُحَرِّكَ الْأَعْضَاءِ, and our intentions then move our limbs. وَالْخَوَاتِرَ الْمُحَرَّكَةِ لِلرَّغْبَةِ تنقسم إلى ما يدعو إلى الشر أعني إلى طيب. So he says that the khawatir al-muharraka lil-raghba, so the thoughts that then move us into a desire, are divided up into things that call us to doing evil. He says وأعني إلى ما يضر إلى العاقبة, and he means by what calls us to evil is that it will have a negative effect on us in the next life. So the first category are bad thoughts, for lack of better words, or bad inclinations. And how do we know what is bad from that? Is because it has an evil result in the next life. It could have an evil result in this life, but if the most important thing is the result in the next life. وَإِلَى مَا يَدْعُ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ وَأَعْنِ إِلَى مَا يَنْفَعُ فِي الدَّارِ الْآخِرَةِ. And the second category is the things that incline us to goodness. And what Imam Ghazali says, those things that incline us to goodness in the next life. Again, as Muslims, we are people who have submitted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have people that are trying to give our entire selves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the only metric that is important to us is what is going to benefit us in this life, in the next life. What's happening now can be perceived as good, but perhaps it's very, very bad for us. And perhaps what is very, very difficult or hard for us right now is something that is going to be the most important thing for us in the next life. Prime example of that is Fajr right now. Salat al-Fajr comes in at like 3:45. And Salat al-Isha is at like 10 o'clock. You pray Isha, you wind down, you have tea, talk to your family, boom, you're in bed at 12 o'clock now. You have 3.5 hours of sleep. And then Shuruq is at like 5. So you got an hour or so to play with, but that's like 5 hours, most. For most people, it's going to be like 4. After 4 hours of sleep, we then now have to get up and pray Fajr. That, to most of us, is very difficult. And I'm sure, I don't want anyone to raise hands, it's very hard right now in these summer months. But that Fajr, praying Salat al-Fajr on time, and then even more preferably in congregation, is something that will earn us the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the next life. Because of the first things that we'll be asked about on Yawm al-Qiyamah is going to be the condition of our prayer. And so if in the very least, before going to sleep, we have to think about Fajr. Make sure that that is a khatir, an inclination that comes to our mind. And then in the very least, make the intention to get up on time. Intention is not enough. Set 2-3 alarms. But wallahi, I'm telling you this by my own experience, I always have 2-3 alarms set up. But there's a difference between me having 2 or 3 alarms set up without making the intention and then with making the intention. Wallahi, every single night I'll see a difference. When I go to sleep, I say, okay, my alarms are set up, boom, I'm going to get up on time. That's one thing. But if I intentionally say, I'm inshallah going to pray Fajr on time, something usually wakes me up. Whether it's kids, whether it's gotta go to bed, it's always something that wakes you up, subhanAllah. So, to continue on with Imam al-Ghazali, فهما خطران مختلفان So he says that these are 2 different things that have 2 different names. فالخاطر المحمود يسمى إلهاما. So these things that have 2 different names, and the thing that is praiseworthy is called ilham. I can't translate ilham right now. The translation is slipping me. If anyone else has a translation that's somewhat good or better than my lack of translation, please don't feel free to give it to me. But ilham is a good khatir. We'll just leave it at that. Inspiration, jazakumullah khair. So the khatir, the thing that comes to us that is praiseworthy, meaning praiseworthy, it's going to lead us to a good end, is inspiration. Wal khatir al-madhmuma, the shameful or unpraiseworthy khatir, that it's going to have a negative effect in the next life, he said it's called waswas. It's called waswasa, or whispers. And this is the crux of what we're going to talk about, or what we're going to try to focus on. the differentiation between these two. The differentiation between waswas, whispers of shaitan, and ilham, inspiration, again, a negative end and a good end, is starting with our involuntary inclinations. ثم إنك تعلم إن هذه الخواطر حادثة ثم إن كل حادثة فلا بد له من المحدث. So he's getting very technical now. He says that we have to know that all of these khawatir happen, or all of these they happen, and every hadith, everything that happens, then no doubt it has a reason that it happens. فهما اختلفت الحوادث دل ذلك على اختلاف الأسباب هذه ما عرف من سنة الله تعالى. So he continues on. He said all these different hawadith, all of these different things, and they differ with their reasons. He's sort of just repeating what he said early on. He says, وكذلك لأنوار القلب وظلمات سببان مختلفان. So with regards to the anwar al-qalb, things that enlighten our hearts, or things that bring darkness to our hearts, have two different origins or two different reasons. So the first is ilham, what we already said was something that calls us to doing good. And this is because it has an angelic orientation. It's something, another definition of ilham is something that has angelic orientation. And the khatir that calls us to do evil has a demonic orientation. It's demonic. So we have ilham and we have waswas. We have something that is angelic in its nature and something that is demonic in its nature. Now, this orientation, this inspiration, if that encourages or leads to us doing something good, then this is tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If this inspiration, the end result of it is a good action, then this is tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if this waswas, this whisper, ends in us doing an evil action or a negative action, then this is a failure. This is khidlan on our part. And Imam al-Ghazali here, just to point this out, mentions how at the end, whatever we do, whether it's good or it's bad, is because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is removing our control because we are limited at the end of the day. And so these thoughts that come to us, we have to make sure that we are controlling them at each step of the way, as Imam Ghazali mentioned earlier. At the first step of the khatir, the first step of the inclination, then at the step of the desire, and then at the step of the want, and then the step of the intention. فإن المعاني المختلفة تفتقر إلى اسما مختلفا. فالملك عبره. So, in conclusion of this little part right here, Imam al-Ghazali says that every single thing, he mentioned the ayah, وَمِن كُلُّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقْنَاهُ زَوْجَيْنِ, that every single thing was created in pairs. And so just like, okay, we're not going to go down that road, but everything was created in pairs, and of those pairs is how we have good inclinations and we have bad inclinations. And just like we have good inclinations, they have tawfiq. If we are blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to control it and to it ending up in a good action. And then we are failures if that thing ends up in a negative thing. So then Imam al-Ghazali, he goes on to say, واجتذاب القلب بين هذين المسلطين قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم القلب المؤمن بين أصابع من أصابع الرحمن. He says that the thing that inclines the heart of the heart are these two things. As the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said that the heart of the believer is between the two fingers of the fingers of Ar-Rahman. Stop there. Imam Ghazali immediately goes into explaining that to make sure we do not have any I can't even say the word. We don't attribute to it human things in nature. Anthropomorphic. It says, فالله تعالى يتعالى عن أن يكون له أصابع متركبة من اللحم والدم والعصب. So that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is exalted upon having fingers or having limbs that are comprised of meats or flesh and blood and bones, or that have different parts in them. ولكن الروح الأصبع سرع للتقلب. He says, but the spirits of these fingers, these divine fingers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I'm going to try to say divine so that we understand that it's nothing like ours, they are quick to change. Again, the Prophet ﷺ said the heart of the believer is between the two fingers, the two divine fingers of the most merciful. And this is quick to change. وَالْقُدْرَ عَلَى التَّحَرُّكِ وَالتَّغَيُّرِ. And these divine limbs have the ability to change. Excuse me, divine limbs I don't like it. This divine characteristic, we'll say, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is quick to change. And it has the power to taharrak, to make change or to make movement, and to, is quick to flip its orientation and has the ability to change and to move. فإنك لا تريد أصابعك لشخصه بل لفعله وتقلبه والترديد كما أنك. So Imam Ghazali, he says, we don't want fingers because of what they are. We don't want fingers because they're actually fingers. Rather, we want these characteristics because of the action, that the ability they have to change or to flip and to make affirm and to raise or control the actions or to encourage the actions. And this is the point that he's mentioning, is that our fingers as human beings, we don't want them simply because they're fingers. We want them because the ability I have now to grab this, the ability I have to change things, to open a door. That's the benefit of me having fingers. So he's giving this example of ta'ala Allahu anha, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exalted of it. The point is not fingers. The point is the ability, the characteristic, divine characteristic of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Imam Ghazali, he brings something that I found was very hopeful or hope-inspiring by saying the heart in its origin, the heart in its بِأَصْلِ الْفِطْر صَالِح لِقُبُولُ آثَارِ الْمَلَكِ. So the heart in its fitra, in its innate state, is able to take these angelic athar, to take these angelic reminiscences. Well, also, they're able to take the athar of shaitan, to have these demonic inspirations as well. In conclusion of this whole part, our heart in its natural state is open to both of these. And us as human beings, we have to make sure that we are trying to make sure our orientation is one that is positive. And in conclusion of this, I'll open the floor to questions because I know my translation is not the best. He says, قال جابر ibn Ubayd al-Adawi, righteous man of the past, he says, شكوت إلى الأعلى ibn Ziyad. He said, so one righteous person complained to another righteous person of the whispers that come to his heart or to his chest. And he said to him in answering, so he was upset that he had waswasa. He was upset that he had these demonic inspirations. So he complained to someone who he thought was more righteous than him. And he says, this is an example, is like a house. This example of these waswasa, these whispers, is like a house that a thief walks by. If this house has in it something that he wants to take, then he'll take it, then he'll take what's in it. But if it doesn't have anything, then he keeps on walking and leaves it alone. And Imam Ghazali explaining this, he says that the heart القلب الخيالي الخالي عن الهوى لا يدخله الشيطان. That the heart that is free from inclinations, desires, that doesn't have any feeling at all, shaitan is not going to even enter into it. Again, a heart that is free from anything, it's a ghafil state, it's heedless of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Shaitan is like this thief that doesn't find anything in the house. He's going to keep moving and not take it. He says, وَلِذَلِكَ قَالَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى إِنَّ عِبَادِي لَيْسَ لَكَ عَلَيْهِمْ سُلْطَانٌ. That shaitan has no control over us. فَكُلُّ مَا اتَّبَعَ الْهَوَى. So everyone that follows their desires, فَهُوَ عَبْدُ الْهَوَى لَا عَبْدُ اللَّهِ. So everyone that follows their desires is a slave of their desires and not a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلِذَلِكَ سَلَطَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ الشَّيْطَانِ. And for this reason, Allah allowed shaitan to take control over it. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, أَفَرَأَيْتَ مِنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهُ هَوَى. Have you not seen the person who takes his desires as a God or as a deity? فَهُوَ إِشَارُ إِلَىٰ أَنَّ الْهَوَى إِلَهُ وَمَعْبُودُ. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is signaling that the desires are like a God or like a deity that are worshipped. فَهُوَ عَبْدُ الْهَوَى لَا عَبْدُ اللَّهِ. And that we are a slave to our desires and not to a slave of Allah. So in conclusion, our job as Muslims, as people who believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is to strive to control ourselves at the most fundamental state. It's far more difficult to control things or to change things after they've become actions. Once we've done something, just think about our own lives. It's far easier to say, I'm not going to do something if we've not done it yet. But once I've done something that is harmful to myself or harmful to other people, then now I've got to apologize, now I've got to change this thing. And God forbid this thing become something that is a habit. And then God forbid it becomes something that is a characteristic of who we are. So our job is to try to pay attention, try to tune our hearts to our khawatir, to tune our hearts to those things that come to us. And as my teacher or one of my mentors was mentioning, that these things also not only have spiritual effects on us, they have psychological effects. Because if we aren't attuned to our hearts, then they can lead to depression. If we aren't, again, if we're not attentive of our hearts, then it can lead to depression. Because depression is a psychological thing. It's in our mind. Perhaps, of course, it has a hormonal nature to it, that some people suffer from depression because of hormones, that there is a chemical imbalance that they cannot control. But many of us suffer from depression and anxieties and other different things because of we're not taking the proper steps when they first happen. So, for example, if we think that we are less than as human beings, we have to remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all the numerous things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with, the qualities that we do have that are blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we are able to do. And then we have to think about the things that we actually stop from doing. And this is a way to stop our depression or our anxieties that we have. We have to remember that at the end of the day, I don't have control over what's going to happen in the future. So if the thoughts come to my mind, let's say I don't know, something, it's anxiety. I have a fear of speaking, for example. I don't, fortunately, alhamdulillah. But let's say I have a fear of speaking. So what's going to happen? Way before I get up here, as I'm preparing my speech, it's, oh my God, how many people are going to be there? Oh my God, what if I stumble? What if I stutter? What if I'm off? What if they don't like it? And these are the things that are going to start coming to my mind. And then once they come to my mind, they can grow. I can't get up there. Then they have psychosomatic effects. They start to affect my body. I start to sweat. I start to shake. I become worried. And then perhaps they enable me from even speaking to the public. But if I stop this when it first happens, no, I've put in the work. I prepared. No, I'm a capable person. I have the ability. I was even chosen to speak because of the abilities that I have. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what they think because my intention is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If I do make a mistake, then that's a lesson for me to grow. I'm stopping each of these waswas, I'm stopping each of these inclinations at the very roots so that they don't have psychological or psychosomatic effects on me. They don't have things happening in my mind, or they don't have things that happen in my mind and then affect my body out in action. So with that, anything that I said that was correct was from Allah and Allah alone. Anything that I said was incorrect was from myself and the shaitan. I open the floor to questions and comments, inshallah. I think the sisters have a microphone. So Allah, I'm not going to speak for Imam Ghazali. I'll speak for what I understood from his works. It's what I've heard from my teachers, it's something out of our control. Something that could be perhaps from actual memory, or it could be an involuntary, something that's made up in our minds. But just like the example I gave as far as anxieties, I made up that whole scenario, which is very real for many people. I'm not belittling it. But then you start to make something up. That's a memory that can actually become something that you can believe, but it never happened. And so whether it's a memory or a thought, perhaps I should do this, perhaps I should do that, then when that happens, Wallahu alam, that's what Imam Ghazali meant from al-Khawatir, or the Inclinations, Wallahu alam. What I understand from it now.
My question is, what advice do you have for some of us, like, who are having difficulty with like wanting to go to lectures, wanting to go to want to go, I feel very bored. So what advice do you have? I'm guessing from your talk, it's kind of like just do it and then slowly it'll become something very, what advice?
So I'm going to ask a follow-up question so that you can clarify for me. What I'm understanding from your question is, what do we do if you want to do more but don't have the ability to?
Or more motivation.
Wallahu a'lam. If you want to really do more, then don't wait for something other to come out. So one of the examples, and again, I'm going to tell you where a far better explanation is much well thought out in 5 lectures. One of the examples that my teacher gave was how many of us say, I'm going to study. But then we take our time to get to the whole study process. We get a snack from the kitchen, we get something to drink, we watch some TV, we sit down, and then perhaps we get to actually studying. And then when we actually studying, maybe I have like WhatsApp open, Telegram here. This is actually me when I'm trying to study. You've got these things, you've got something in the background going on. But if we actually want to do something, then we remove these things and actually commit to it. And if it's really something that we want to do, then we try everything in our ability to actually enact these things. Now, something that I didn't mention that I remember my teacher mentioned was a very, very important thing is having mentors and people that we seek counsel from. Because again, we don't know if this thing is something that is necessarily or objectively good for us or objectively bad. We have no clue. Everything is subjective based on our perspective. So maybe me wanting to give this halaqa tonight, I thought was to give you all something, but again, it could all be subjective, and it's really for my ego, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make that not the case. Again, we don't know these things, and that's why we have mentors that sort of differentiate these things. And so I'll sort of tell you who the person my teacher is, and so that you can follow up on this thing. If you Google On the Heart by Dr. Umar Farooq Abdullah, you'll find a 5-lecture series where he goes over this entire chapter. Video number 4, he goes over this, what we talked about tonight. Excuse me, so that's On the Heart by Dr. Umar Farooq Abdullah. The example that he gave was when he went to Egypt in the mid-70s, and he had not yet finished his PhD. He said, "Khalas, I'm done. I'm staying here in Egypt. I'm going to seek knowledge." And he was sitting with reputable scholars. But then he sought counsel from one of his mentors. He said, "No, you must go back, face the hardship of grad school and finish your PhD, and then perhaps in the future you'll do something. And he says, without a shadow of a doubt, that was the right decision for me. I could not be better. And he says, it's even some of the advice that I give to other people. He said, but my desire perhaps wasn't the best. And by seeking counsel, he said this was able to help him. So again, if you want to make a change, then actually do it. Don't be lazy. Don't wait for something external to change you. Make the effort in ihris, as Sheikh Yasser mentioned in the khutbah today, ihris ala ma yanfa'ak. Be diligent in the things that benefit you. So remove distractions. And then seek counsel. Seek counsel of people who you respect, and specifically people who have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then have knowledge about the things you're seeking counsel on. I'm not going to ask for finance from someone who has no knowledge of finance. Likewise, I'm not going to seek shar'i or religious information, whether it's spiritual or practical, from someone who has never studied Sharia. And I'm not going to seek Islamic finance from someone who's never done either. So, yeah. Hold on. It's On the Heart by Dr. Omar Farouk Abdullah.
I thought it would be helpful if us to mention the motive behind it. Why did he have to write it? He wrote it in the later period of his life after he has his own crisis. But he thought that the religious sciences became very much dead, too legalistic, certain parts too political, and he was very, very hard in Kitab al-Ilm, which is, you know, at the very, very beginning of Al-Ihya, on the fuqaha of the day. That basically they just sit down and they have all this overly technical, you know, jurisdictional about hypothetical situations, and that affected the moral and spiritual life of the Muslims at the time. So he said that he wants to revive those religious sciences by saying that, you know, based on, of course, the Quran and Al-Hadith, that we have to go to where the faith really resides. And then he makes the distinction between Al-Aql and Nafs and Al-Heart. So by the heart, he didn't really mean the kind of biological organ. He did say that it affects the biological organ, but he defined it as, you know, so it would help to say that, look, you know, Quran says, وَنَفْسٌ ما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها. Basically, and you know, when the Prophet, peace be upon him, was asked, you know, where's the Iman, he pointed to his heart. So if we sit down and we think that kind of, even in Ihya Ulumuddin, he tells us when he speaks about Salah, Siyam, Zakah, Hajj, what is the technical requirements, and that is what is the heart spiritual meaning of every act of worship we did. And he reminds us that don't just go pray mechanically and you think that you fulfill the obligation. Don't just kind of fast by just, you know, refraining from eating and drinking. So that is the whole motive of it, you know, and that is why, of course, he thinks that, you know, if at the beginning also of the book about the vices and virtues, he goes back to the same, that it is a moral and a spiritual revival, and each and every one of us can partake on it by taking care of our heart in the spiritual. That is the motive of Ihya Ulumuddin for the most part.
Jazakumullah khair. You should have gotten up here. Barakallah feek. I think your comment in again, Jazakumullah khair, for it is very practical to us in our day and age, because our religion has maybe gone back to or never stopped being very technical. When someone converts, they have to learn how to pray. And they're told to women put on hijab, and men told to do this and grow beards and these very, external things. And they're not even given the opportunity to focus on the internal things. And likewise, for us who perhaps born Muslim or been Muslim for a very long time, we make sure we're praying. But how often do we make sure the quality of our prayer is actually good? And especially for us young people, you know, we just make sure we prayed. Like, did it and took 2 seconds, like literally 2 seconds is boom, 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 boom. You forget about the actual ruh of the actual prayer. And that, as the Shaykh Jazakallah Khair, he mentioned, is the entire point of Ihya, to reorient these things, to not just be mechanical in orientation. And so that's why Imam al-Ghazali is talking about these things. When we're talking about the actions that can lead to our destruction, we have to make sure we pay attention to our hearts. Allahu A'lam, by not negating, by not being neglectful to either. Sometimes the external will come before the internal. But by not neglecting it, by not only focusing on the internal, also focusing, not only focusing on the external, but also keeping in mind the internal. Sometimes it requires us to force ourselves into ibadah or into righteousness or into whatever it may be, or leaving off bad things. But again, paying attention to the internal, the grand picture of why we're doing these things. So before we drink, we say Bismillah. Why am I saying Bismillah? Because I have to Sharia. Oh, Bismillah, okay, I need to drink. Shaitan doesn't drink with me, etc. What does Bismillah mean? So you see what I'm saying? We try to infuse between the two. If a sister is saying she's going to wear hijab, it's a very external thing. I'm going to wear hijab now. But also not forgetting I'm wearing hijab because it's pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the bigger picture as to why it is. So again, trying to not neglect either. Wallahu a'lam. All right. جزاكم الله خير. بارك الله فيك. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless everyone who attended. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enable us to be in control of our desires, be in control of our wants, be in control of our intentions, and be in control of our actions. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enable us to have angelic khawatir, angelic thoughts that inspire us to do good, and for the demonic tests that we have that come to us, give us the strength, because only you can give us strength to persevere through them and not follow them. We ask you, Ya Allah, to increase us in our consciousness of you. Enable us and allow us to always be conscious of you in the good times and the bad times, and always to never let us be heedless of you. Ya Allah, allow us to always be mindful of you and never let us think that we are in control, because indeed you are in control of all things, Ya Allah. Never let us be forgetful of that. We ask you, Ya Allah, to give us strength with any shortcomings or any deficiencies or any hardships that we may be going through. Ya Allah, if we suffer from waswasa, if we suffer from anxiety, if we suffer from anything, Ya Allah, give us strength to overcome it. And Ya Allah, allow all of us to never be tested from it. We ask you, Ya Allah, to enable us to have the fortitude to act upon our khawatir. Make our hearts sensitive to those inclinations that come to us. Enable us to act upon them in a way that is pleasing to you, in light of the sunnah of your beloved sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Ya Allah, Ya Kareem, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.